All right, so welcome everybody. We're going to kick off with Ignacio and maybe Kudzi, just giving us a demo of what they've been doing in Confluence and Jira and in Slack as well with some integrations. So Ignacio, yeah, if you'd like to share your screen now,
Sure.
and you can walk us through what you've been doing.
All right. Now, share screen. Okay, here we go. I'll do share. I think you should be able to see the share Slack, a Slack app,
Yes.
and that's terrific. Now, on the left-hand side here under apps, if you toggle that, drop it down, this is where you can tell Slack what apps you want to add to the app so that it can communicate notifications. So this morning I've just added Jira, and so in fact when you click on the plus sign, you've got a whole set of apps that you can add. And last week I added Confluence. This week I thought I'd add Jira just to play with it. So that's effectively how. Let me see if I can escape out of there. How do I get out of there? Browse directory.
So you could just click anywhere on the left-hand side if you want to. So down on the bottom left, you've got Jira. So you could click in that Jira app and see what's in there.
Right. So this is. So I added Jira, and when you add Jira, you are allowed how to manage the notifications that you want to receive through Slack. As you can see, I've doubled up on API, which is the space that's Kudzi created, because Kudzi and I were playing with it a couple of times. But what I did this morning to add Jira to it, effectively you click on Manage, then you get a panel that will indicate how you want Slack to perform the notifications. You can filter on the issue types. I've just left it as all the priorities. You can then also select how you want a message to be received on the basis of what action happens within Jira. So if an issue is created and an assignee is updated, these are my choices. They eventually present it blank, so it's unfiltered, but I thought I'd select a filter for created, issues that are created, and issue where the assignee is updated. So you just save changes, and as you can see, looks like Ryan created a bug. So that's a notification. I just save the changes, and you will hear that note saying project notifications have been saved. I think from here I just need to close that down, because what I then did is I went to Jira, and what I did is, as a test, I selected this issue and I assigned it to Paul. So Kudzi was a reporter and it was unassigned. So I thought I'd reassign it to Paul, and I've sent a little message here. I've assigned this issue to you. Please review and let's discuss next steps. I also thought I'd test the notification for Kudzi. So I put a message here for Kudzi, FYI, I've assigned this issue to Paul for his review and action. And that's effectively it. Now, Paul confirmed that he did receive the notification. So I just wanted to see how easy it was to integrate Jira and Confluence to Slack, and I'm just now discovering the power of Slack, and I'm just playing around with this, but it's as simple as that. So when you get back to Slack, in the Confluence channel, well, this is what I set up last week. I added Confluence as the app, so and there were some changes that were notified through Slack. Now, I'm just playing with this, so if I rambled and it didn't really make a lot of sense, I'm just discovering it. This is the first time that I've done it. I just wanted to demonstrate, how you can actually get the different Atlassian apps and others onto Slack, and how powerful it is as a team communications mechanism.
That's awesome. Yeah, good stuff, Ignacio. And I haven't played with this before, so that'll be really cool to try it out and yeah, see where we can take it, what we can do with it. That's really good.
Thanks, Paul. So I'll
Yeah,
stop sharing now.
yeah, no
Um,
stress.
yeah, but keen to see how others find the integration. It's like anything we've got on this journey. It's Atlassian tools are very powerful, and they're great. You can do a lot, but then you've got to sort of, I guess, be 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 considerate and thoughtful about how you set up these things so that you can have consistency in the communication and the types of notifications that you want to put out.
Yeah, yeah, really good point. That's awesome. Yeah, well done. Kudzi, did you want to add anything with what you've been doing?
Hi everyone. I
Well
actually
done.
had started playing around with the integration, Ignacio, but I was enjoying receiving all the notifications, just seeing how powerful that was, and reviewing and publishing. And again, I guess one of the things that I've been trying to focus on more is just repeating what we go through the sessions with you, Paul, and everybody else, just to make sure that I can actually um, make sense of the workflows myself,
Yep.
in an actual sort of like a scenario, like a live scenario. Yeah, that's really what I've been doing. And I'm pretty sure everybody else has been doing that as well. So nothing particularly out of this world to share, except that I've been redoing the steps, and playing around a lot more in both Confluence and Jira, and looking forward to learning more again, picking your brains and redoing it. It's all about practice. What I'm finding is just
Yeah,
practice, practice, practice.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been really really eye opening to
that's
learn.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, well done. And yeah, it's great to see everybody jumping in and playing around with Jira and Confluence. And as you said, because you're just practicing what we've been going over so far. That's really cool. Um, all right, fantastic. Well, we might get underway. I'm just going to close my and open my chat screen. Okay, so I'll share my screen. Okay. All right, so hopefully there now you can see Jira. We're looking at the backlog. And during our last meetup, we started to get in a bit more into integrating Jira and Confluence together. And at the end of it, we discussed looking at workflows and the power of workflows. So we'll start off just to set the context, I guess. We're looking at the columns in our ancient furniture Jira project here. And we were talking last time about adding columns in and changing statuses and what are statuses and what can you do with them, etc. So our board for ancient furniture at the moment, we've got to do, in progress, resolved and done are the columns that are in here. And if we go into, here's a tab I prepared earlier. If we go into the board settings, now I know that we haven't gone through board settings yet in our project administrator sessions. We could do that in a future session, or we could maybe cover this as part of our weekly catch-ups, just as we're doing now. So column management, the columns we can see here, we've got to do, in progress, resolved and done. And those columns are mapped to statuses. So under the to-do column, our statuses have open and reopened are both mapped to to-do. In progress is mapped to in progress, resolved is mapped to resolved, and done is mapped to done. Now for this, this board, we're not using a simplified workflow, we're using a specific workflow, and that was imported from the mock data that we were using. So we'll have a look at the workflow in a moment. But if for this workflow, if we wanted to add another status, we can't do that from this board because we're not using a simplified workflow. So we might want to have an in review or testing status or column added, for example. So if we go to the project settings, then one of the options there, and you'd remember this from the previous sessions, is looking at the workflows. So the workflow that we are currently using here is, it's just called Jira Editable After Close. the workflow that this project, when I imported it as mock data, was initially using was the out-of-the-box Jira workflow. And one of the restrictions on that is that I couldn't edit. So I wanted to set story points for items that in the mock data that had already been closed, for example, but I couldn't edit it because there was a restriction in that workflow. So I copied the workflow and then modified it. I removed that property to make it non-editable upon close. And then I used that workflow here instead. Now with our workflows, when we're looking at, and I'll just repeat where we are here, I'm looking at project settings for ancient furniture and under the workflow menu option on the left-hand side here, right? And we could see here also that this workflow, Jira editable after close, is associated with all of the issue types that are under this project. So tasks, assumptions, bugs, improvements, regular, whatever that is, risk, story, etc. All of those will follow this same workflow. One of the use cases for when we might want to use a different workflow might be that, for example, a production issue or a project issue or a project risk might have its own workflow. So it might be appropriate to have triaged or different statuses of resolved, owned, mitigated, accepted, something like that, instead of just a simple closed or done status. Might not be appropriate for a risk. So with workflows, we can assign different workflows for different issue types if we want to, and through those workflows, we can have different screens appearing at different steps along the way. So if we edit this workflow, and to view a workflow, you don't have to edit it. We can see here there's an option to view a workflow as text or a diagram, and they would be read-only if you're viewing them that way. But we'll have a look at those two viewing options when we're editing. So when we edit a workflow, we can either look at it as a diagram, so a visual representation, or there's a text version. This text version is how Jira used to always manage workflows in the early days, and then they added the visual later. So I mostly just use the visual side of it now because the text version is a bit complicated. But I'll just run through the structure here. So we've got a step name, and a linked status, a transition. So there's a couple of concepts here. We have statuses, and to move from one status to another is done via a transition. And then we've got some actions that we can add here. So for a given status, we could add a transition, we can delete a transition, we could edit the status, or we could view the status's properties. And this representation in text is, like I said, it's a little bit clunky. We can see here a number after each of the transitions. So start progress, that is transition number 4, resolve issue is transition number 5. We've got one down here, stop progress, which is 301. These are the identifiers in the database, I guess. So start progress, this one is ID number 4 in the database. And probably what we wouldn't want to see here is resolve issue 5 here and resolve issue with a different ID here. That would be creating new transitions and they're not being reused. There might be some cases where it might be appropriate to have two transitions to in progress, for example, that might be separate. It could be that you go from to do to in progress, and that transition might not have any mandatory fields, for example. But if you went from closed back to in progress, then you might want to make a comment mandatory, or you might want to have a reason field or something like that that's mandatory. So in that case, you may have two transitions that have the same name going back to the same status, but they're implemented differently for whatever reason.
So Paul, these numbers are absolute. You can only have one start progress, and it's identified as 4, as we can see in the different
Actually, they can be duplicated. So we could have one start progress that has a number 4, and then you could have another start progress that has some other identifier. There are benefits and there are issues with that. One of the issues is if you duplicate your transitions and you modify the properties for one, it won't be modified in the other one. So if you had 2 start progress transitions, and so going from open to in progress, you might have start progress. Going from down here. Okay, so we've got reopened to start progress. If we duplicated the transition and we had some different configuration for the transition, then that would, you'd have inconsistent behavior between the two. So we can look at that in a bit more detail later. I know this is a lot to take in, right? So we can talk a lot more about this via Slack and in future as well. Just one point to note here, this step name, it's never really been used. I think early days it was really confusing about, well, what's the difference between a step name and the status that you're linking to it? And so in the visual representation under the diagram view, they don't have step name anymore. It's just the status that shows, but the step name is kind of managed in the background. All right. So if we look at the diagram view, it's a lot easier, right? And this workflow, we have I'm just going to turn on showing transition labels. So this workflow, and every workflow has a beginning point. So it's where we create an issue. And our first status that it goes to is open. And then from here, the different options are going to resolving the issue. That's the transition resolve issue, which takes us to a status of resolved. And then from resolved, we can close the issue. What else can we do? From resolved, we can reopen the issue. There are only two options there. So this workflow is quite rigid, really. There are limits on what you can do. If we were to go to another project, so let's go to APR, that was your new one that you created, wasn't it? So if I go to the settings here and go to workflows, and I view the diagram here. So this workflow is different, right? It's got a create transition. And when you create a new project in Jira, you get a simplified workflow by default. So this one has the statuses of backlog, selected for development, in progress, done, and unmapped. And you can see there's this thing on the right that says all. And what that means is you can move to backlog from any other status. You can move to selected from development from any other status. So there's no restrictions on moving from one status to another. And in a lot of cases, that's perfect, right? Because you want people just to be able to drag things from one place to another on the board. There might be times though where you need to curb that behavior a little bit. If you need bugs to go through testing, for example, and not have people just drag it straight to done, that might be a scenario where you might want to introduce some rigor into your workflow. Okay, so I'll jump back into this one. Any questions so far? Question from Supro. Workflows behave much public, I guess, and affects multiple projects. Yep, much like a public variable. They certainly can. So workflows can be shared across multiple projects, and in that case, you need to be really careful about the changes that you make, or they could be specific to a project or to an issue type. This is where it gets a bit complicated. It's good to have standardization, but there's a balance between standardization and some freedom to run a project or manage a project the way that you need to in your organization. A large organization like ANZ would need more rigor around management of workflows and the standards applied across projects compared with a startup, for example. It might be appropriate for a startup for people just to be able to create their workflows and try things out and modify them. And then come up with a standardization once things sort of settled down and matured a little bit. Another question there, what does unmapped status mean in the workflow below? So if I jump back to this one, Kudzi and Ignacio, did you create that unmapped status?
I did.
Not me.
I did. I was just, as part of the demo that you did on Tuesday, I was just playing around with it. That's why
cool.
the unmapped is there, but I could have just deleted it as a
So that's great, because my question was, so you can customize your workflows in Jira depending, as you said, Paul, on the rigor. And I see that Kudzi, you created this workflow. I don't want to put you up on the stage unnecessarily, but maybe you can show us one day, Kudzi, how to build the workflow and live on screen.
Do you want me to?
Hopefully, maybe.
No, And this is perfect, right? This is what the meetup is all about. This is your meetup, not mine. And this is for you to learn in whatever way is helpful for you guys, right? So Kudzi jumping in and creating that that status in the workflow, that's perfect, right? That's what I want you guys to do, is to try things out and work things out. Asking questions in these meetups, that's also perfect, because that's what it's all about. And the questions in the chat, I'm really happy, guys. This is exactly what it's meant to be. So Kudzi, if it's okay, I might just kind of simulate or extend what you've done here in your configuration. So Kudzi would have jumped into board configuration for the APR project, and would have either added a status or added a column.
Edit
So
a
if
column, yeah.
add a column, cool. So if I add a column here and I say in testing, right, actually maybe, oh yeah, okay. Okay, we had that one in. We can see that if you add a column, now again, this is using a simplified, using a simplified workflow, okay? So this one gives me the freedom to add statuses and columns and everything from the board itself. Well, columns you can add anytime, but the status isn't changing the workflow. I can do that if I'm using a simplified workflow. So I've added an in testing column, and it's added a status to match to that. So when Kudzi created a column called unmapped, Jira created a matching status to match that, so that you could drag work into the unmapped status. So if I now go back to the board and I drag stakeholder analysis and profiling workshop, now I can't move that one to in testing. I can go to unmapped. That's interesting. Why can't I do that? Let me go to workflow. So here I'm using the simplified workflow, and I'm going to edit that one. And in here, in testing from everywhere to everywhere, so this one's got me intrigued. So if I go from unmapped to in testing, I can do it that way. Now if I look at the board, okay, maybe I needed to refresh my screen. So I think Jira, even though in the background the workflow had been updated, the board itself, for whatever reason, wasn't working.
And was that a visual cue that you got because it didn't turn green? Is that what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I first dragged it over, in testing it was just grey. There was no functionality there. Okay. So I did that from, no, I did it from that screen, didn't I? Went into board settings here. That's very interesting. Okay, so there's another glitch in Jira. So folks, if you add a column to your board via board settings, if it doesn't work first up, just try refreshing your screen. There we go. We've all learned something today. Okay, now I'm going to discard that draft.
So at its very basic, a simplified workflow is no constraints. You said you can have all statuses to all issues to all statuses without constraints.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So if I go back into project settings here now, and workflows. Yeah, that's exactly right. So this one is using the simplified workflow. And yeah, you're right. So you can move from any status to any status, and there are no constraints in between. Exactly right. So I'm just going to jump back into ancient furniture now. So we were talking about columns and statuses, and we were looking at the workflow down here. And this one is restricted. Okay. So here, for example, in ancient furniture, I can move from open to in progress. I can close, I can resolve. Okay, so in this one, if I wanted to delete the transition, so if I wanted to prevent people from going from open to close, and I wanted them to go through resolved first. Then I could delete a transition. Okay. And now if I publish this, now just with the with workflows, when you edit a workflow, it will create a new draft. I can publish the draft, I can discard it. If I want to just scrap this and go back to the original one that I was looking at, I can view the original workflow if I'm a bit worried about the changes that I've made. It'll show here that it's a draft at the moment. I can edit the workflow name, the workflow description, sorry. I can see the project. So Supro raised a point before that a workflow might be used by multiple projects. So if I wanted to check and see which projects were going to be impacted by my changes, I can view that here. And we were looking before at viewing the workflow in a text format or a diagram format. The other thing that's interesting here is exporting. So you can export a workflow as XML. Not quite sure why you'd do that. Maybe if you're just interested and want to see the workflow XML that's behind it, or you can export as a workflow, which I think is probably still XML format. But if you export a workflow, you could import it into other instances. So if we exported a workflow from our IntegrityWorks demo site, we could then import that workflow in theory into Demo 01 and Demo 02, the other sites that I've set up. So that's pretty cool. You can also share that workflow on the marketplace, the Atlassian marketplace, if you wanted to, and you could also find other workflows available on marketplace too. So that's pretty cool. And I think people probably sell workflows as well if they've got something that's really complicated and sophisticated stuff. Maybe I should look at doing that for some cash. I don't think anybody will buy it though. So they're the options that are available. We'll come back to adding statuses and adding transitions shortly, but I just want to publish this draft and demonstrate that actually if I go back to, before I publish it, if I go back to our ancient furniture board, so I've got some items here, and I can probably move that to done. Okay, it'll ask me to select a resolution. Okay, so I can move it straight from to do to done. Now, if I go back to my workflow and we've removed the transition from open to closed, and you might be thinking, well, hang on a second, the board is saying to do and done. So just as a quick reminder there, when we look at the configuration, we can see that to do is mapped to the statuses of opened and reopened, and the column of done is mapped to the status of closed. Okay, so if I publish my draft, it then says to me, do I want to save a backup copy? I usually don't, but it's probably a good idea to when you're first starting to play with workflows. So we could save a backup copy. Let's do that and we'll just show where it goes to. Backup workflow name, copy of Jira, editable after close. So it just inserts copy of in the beginning. Just go publish. So this workflow is now active. And if I view that one as a read-only diagram, we can see the link between open and closed is gone. Now, if I go back to my board and refresh, and I try to move one of these to done, it's grayed out, right? So I can't move it from to do to done, but if I drop it in resolved, it'll prompt me for a resolution. And then I could move it across to done. Righto. Now, one question you might have as well is, well, hang on a second, why do we have statuses of resolved and done? Back in the early stages, the default workflow that came with Jira, which is similar to what we've been looking at, if I open that one up, had two different statuses, resolved and closed, and they've kind of done away with it now. I think the theory was that you might resolve something but not yet have it closed. So if you had a production issue, you might have fixed the root cause, but you might want to verify it or something before it was done. They don't really use that now, and in the simplified workflow, it's just a done status. There's no separation between resolved and closed, but there is the concept of having a resolution. So the way I would describe a resolution is that the resolution is an outcome. So when you move something to done, the outcome of that might be, yes, I fixed it. No, I'm not going to fix it. we found that it's a duplicate of something else, or there could be a range of different resolutions. So yeah, if you're wondering what the resolved and closed statuses are for, that was sort of where it originated from. We might also say now, well, we don't want a resolved status anymore. We just want to use closed instead. Now, I'll just see if there's any questions. Hi, Paul, how to get to the screen where you can enable the option to see all transitions between different states? Oh, got it. Okay. So you get it when editing workflows. Yeah, cool. All right. Any other questions before we move on? All good. Keep posting in the chat if you've got questions as we go. That's awesome. All right. So
this is Manoranjan.
Yep. How you going?
All this is Manoranjan.
Yep. Can you hear me?
So, can I modify our workflow in the free version of Jira?
Can you modify the workflow? Yes. Yep.
In the free version of Jira, I use the free Jira version.
Yes.
So can I modify it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the really good question. So the sites that I'm using, Integrity Works Demo. So the 3 sites that you all have access to, based on which one I've assigned you to, there's Integrity Works Demo, Integrity Works Demo 01, and Integrity Works Demo 02. All of those are the free version of Jira. So everything that I'm doing here in the meetup, you can do also. And for everybody who's got access to the ones that I'm demonstrating here, I've added you as system administrators, so you can modify the workflows and stuff as well. And I'd encourage you to do that, right? It'd be awesome if you want to create your own projects and then play around with, create your own workflow and modify it, try and break it. Message me for help if you want to. That'd be brilliant, because that's how you learn. You're not going to do any permanent damage. We can restore all the configuration of one of these from a backup that I've taken if you want to. So if you completely obliterate a workflow, then we can always fix it up. So all good. So go for it. Okay. So what happens? Okay, let's have a look at statuses and the kind of attributes you can have for a status. So when we click on a status here, a couple of things. We can see there's these little dots around. We can create a transition from one to another. So if we wanted to reinstate that transition from open to closed, for example, we can create a transition, then it pops up with this screen, add a transition. We can either create a new transition. Now let's see, if we went from open to in progress, let's see what happens if we try and create a transition there. We can either reuse the in progress, your question before, Ignacio, about the IDs. So we would preferably reuse a transition, but we might need to create another transition between open and start progress. And it might be that it's limited to particular people, for example. So yeah, when you create a transition, you get these options to either create a new one or to reuse a transition. If you create a new one, it'll ask you what status you're moving it from and the status you're moving it to. So I guess you can change your transition if you go, oh darn, I've dragged it between the wrong statuses. I want to change where I'm taking it from and to. You can name your transition. I'm not going to call it Paul Casanova. You can give your transition a description. You can also set a screen. So before when we moved items to done and it popped up this resolution screen, we can say what screen we want to have appear upon that transition, which is really handy. If we reuse a transition, then it will just be selecting which status from and to in the transition to use. So if I wanted to change it from in progress to, now you notice here, we can have a transition which actually returns to the current status. So we could have a transition from in progress to in progress. And we might want to use that to perhaps set some values. If we had a scenario where I've used this before is where I might have been in an organization that had a workflow that allowed items to move to done without having a value set. And then all of a sudden they've gone, oh, hang on a minute. When it goes to done, we want to set a resolution or we want to do something else. You might have a transition which goes from a status to itself, which is limited to administrators, for example. And it could copy data from one field to another, or update a value, set a resolution, something like that. So as an administrator, you might want to take advantage of that to do a bulk update that only you can perform, for example.
And that will be mapped to your privileges as administrator, right?
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
Nobody else would be able to do that.
Yep, exactly. Let's do one of those. So if we go from closed to closed, I'm going to say here, update values, right? I'm not going to have a screen appear just yet. Okay, so now I've got this transition. And if I publish that, I'm going to save it back up at this stage. And go back to here. And one of these ones, let's go to ANF 68. Now I've got this update values status available, and it's showing me that the status it's going to go to, update values transition, sorry, and it's showing me that the status it's going to go to is closed. If I'll do that on the actual board itself, I can't do it, right? So if I try and move it to done, that's not going to work. I could move it back to do, for example, but I can't invoke a transition which returns to the same status from the board here.
So how did you get to that? Oh, so how do you get to this, that little widget?
To this screen. So from the board, all I did was right-clicked and opened in a new tab.
No, I'm referring to when you get to the actual issue, you had the little table that had 3 entries. You just, oh, okay, gotcha. You just click on the status.
Yep, click on the status and that will give you the available workflow transitions.
Got it. So when you click on update values, it just...
Actually, it does nothing, right?
Does nothing.
Because at the moment, it'll show me in the history, it should say that I've gone from closed to closed, but at the moment, we haven't got it actually doing anything. So if I go back to my workflow.
That's right, because you had no screen pop up. That's, you said do nothing.
Yeah. So if I now go and edit my workflow again. All right. So now I'm just going to paste the link to this. And Ignacio, if you want to open that issue up, and anybody else who's got access to IntegrityWorks demo, let's see. So I know some of you are in IntegrityWorks demo 01 and a couple in demo 02 as well. So Ignacio's in here, Jay is there, Kritika, Kudzi, Linda, Nikhil are all in this one as well. Okay.
So that's ancient furniture, right?
Yeah, that's right. So if you just click on that link, and so what I want to do here, I want to restrict this transition. So let's go to, see on the right-hand side here, if I click on a transition, I've got some options here: properties, triggers, conditions, validators, and post functions. I want to step through these now. Just going to open these up in new tabs so that we can go through them. And I'm going to look at conditions first. Okay, when I open those up, so it was triggers, conditions, validators, and post functions. There are these tabs down the bottom. What I want to do right now is add a condition that okay, we'll run through some of these conditions here. And there's a range of different ones here. I know this is a lot to take in. You can check for a condition. You can block a transition until it's approved. I've never used that one before. That's pretty cool. You can compare values. You can hide from a user. So if I wanted to click on, now I've never tried this one before, but let's give it a whirl. Hide from user. Okay, so in that case, that transition could only be triggered from a workflow function or from REST. So if I publish this workflow now, then I, as a user, would no longer see that update values transition option. It's cool and kind of scary. So I'm just going to delete that condition. And let's try adding another one. Only assignee. So ANF68, if I assign that to myself, and in this workflow, and the assignee, so I've just added that condition. So it comes back here and it shows me only the assignee can execute this transition. If I publish that workflow, not going to worry about taking it back up. And then I'll come back here and I'll refresh. Then I can see it. But Ignacio, if you and everybody else has got access to this, if you refresh this issue on your screen, and I've just put it in the chat there, then hopefully
I can confirm that I do not see it. I only have reopen issue and view work. Well, reopen issue is the only transition available.
Awesome. So now I've just assigned it to you. So if you now refresh your screen, so I no longer see it. And drum roll, Ignacio should see it.
Got it. See
Cool.
it now. Reopen issue and update values.
Awesome. So if I go back into conditions,
Okay.
I need to I need to edit my workflow first, of course. Okay.
Whilst you're doing that, Paul, I had a question on screens. The option to present a screen or not. Are the available screens preset, or can the screens be custom modified?
Both. So really good question. So remember when we, now I know it's a while ago, and this is a really good question. This is a key usage of this, right? So a while ago when we were doing system administration in Jira, we were looking at all of the different options that were available, and we whizzed through very quickly the screen. So let's use the resolve issue screen. Perhaps we can take a copy of that screen. Okay, so I'm under administration, in issue administration, and screens is what I'm looking at now. And let's just call this one demo resolve issue screen. Okay, so now in this demo resolve issue screen, that's the one that I've just created. It's not associated with any screen schemes yet. If I configure that, we've got some options here. So there's resolution, fixed versions, assignee, and log work. I can add fields to that screen if I wanted to. Let's just leave it at this for now. And then in my workflow, I'm going to go back to my diagram view. And this one here, update values. Let's edit that transition. Now it's going to open here. That's going to give me the screen. So I can change the name of the transition if I click on edit, and I can also select a screen. So now I can pick that demo resolve issue screen. And usually I would, if I'm creating a screen, I would usually copy another one as a starting point and then modify it from there. So for now, let's use this demo resolve issue screen and publish my draft. And I'm going to take off, I've got that condition that only the assignee can see it. I'm going to remove that condition for now. And I'm going to publish my draft. And you can publish a draft from the screen itself, or I think I open conditions in a new tab. So I can publish from there. I'm going to take it back up. Yeah, I'm just going to close off that other tab. Righto, so now when I go back to, we're looking at ANF68, and the transition that we were playing with was that update values one. So now this transition won't do anything, but it will display a screen to me. Here I could change the resolution if I wanted to. I could change the fixed versions, change the assignee, log some time on it. Every time that you use a screen, it will by default display a comment field, right? So you would notice that in that screen when I was configuring it, if I jump back to the screen configuration, I didn't have comment in there.
So in this screen here, configuring, that's where we said add fields. So that's what I'm saying. You can not only copy a screen, but you can modify whatever you've copied, so you can add and control the number, the types of fields that you want. Is that possible?
Absolutely. So let's do that now. And for changing the content of a screen, for configuring a screen, you don't have to publish a workflow. So if I cancel this now, right, and so just again, that screen appears now when I select the update values transition, and that update values transition is only available when we're in the closed status. So if I went,
yeah, and I can see that I've seen that screen on my.
Yep, awesome. So configuring this screen now, if I got rid of log work and fixed versions, and with configuring screens, you don't need to save anything either. So now if I come back in here and I do update values, it invokes that screen and those fields are gone. If I wanted to add another field, so in here I might say components, for example. Now when I come back in here and I invoke that transition, then components is available as well. All right, so it's really powerful, and it's once you've done it a bit, it's pretty easy to modify screens as well. So it's pretty cool.
That's
you
terrific.
Notice here the button that appears down the bottom is update values. Of course, it's not going to do anything at the moment. Right? What if we wanted to copy now I know we've only got 9 minutes left. What if we wanted to copy when we go from in progress to closed the developer at the time, right? Let's okay, let's go to our custom fields. I know that we showed custom fields, but we haven't done a lot in here yet. Let's create a new custom field. And we've got a lot of different types that are available here, but there is a user picker field. All right. And let's create this new field, and we're going to call it developer. All right. Now, where do we want that field to appear? Well, I want to see what's issue type or screen scheme I'm using and what screens I'm using in my ancient furniture project. So I know this is quick, but you can watch this again in the recording. I'm just going to jump down to project settings. I'm going to go to screens on the left here. And the screen that I'm using just happens to be the default screen, okay? So in my, where was I? Okay, creating the custom field, and I'm going to add it into the default screen. Okay, so if I update that, now we can see in here. So I'm back in ANF 68, and I wouldn't expect to see that field. Oh, there's developer. Okay, so by default, if you've got a user field and it's empty, I think user fields or user picker fields will appear in the list of fields that appear even if they have no values set. So if I configure this screen, I know this is pulling together a lot of things that we've sort of whizzed through really quickly before, but you can see now developer, that's the custom field that I've just created, and I've added it into the default screen, and I might want that to appear up near, I'm going to put it under reporter, okay? All right, and then I'm going to save my changes here. And now if I go back to ANF 68.
It's there, yep.
Yep, the field appears there, okay.
Under reporter, yeah.
Now, let's say that when we go from in progress to closed, I need to edit my workflow. I go from in progress to closed. We're going to have a post function. There's a whole lot of other things in here. I think we're going to run out of time, so a lot of things to talk about, right? But I want to copy a value from one field to another. So I'm going to go copy, and I'm going to copy my assignee to the developer field. Copy of the same issue, yes, going to add that post function. And I'm going to publish my draft. I'm going to take a copy. Now when I come back to ANF68, so at the moment developer is empty, my current assignee, actually I need to pick a different one. Let's see. Oh, we'll use the same one. I'm going to reopen it. Okay, so I've just reopened it. Of course, nothing's happened here because if we look at our workflow, what we've done is I've just gone from closed to reopened. Normally, I don't bother with the reopen status. I would just have everything direct back to open. And then you can have all those other transitions work. But from reopened, we can go to in progress. So we're going to go and move this back to in progress. All right, still nothing's happening. It's assigned it to me, so there must be something in the workflow. When I go from reopen to in progress, what does it do? Okay, of course. Reopen to progress. Now if I view the original, okay, now it'll let me do it. And I just want to see when I go from open in progress. No, I'm going to have to edit to be able to see those properties. Post functions. So it's going to clear the resolution. It sets the issue status to the link status, assigns the issue to the current user. Ah, okay. So it's assigned it to me, even though it's assigned to Ignacio, because I'm the one who's actually doing the transition, it's assigning it to me. So assigning to a current user is also another possibility in post functions, one of those options. So it's pretty cool. So it's assigned it to me. Now I'm going to put it back to Ignacio again, because Ignacio is the developer. And then if we move that to closed, we're going to pick a resolution, done. The reason this is using a different screen, I just confused myself there for a minute, is because this transition, I hadn't changed the screen that it's using. So this is the original resolution screen that we took a copy of. Remember the other transition, when we went from closed back to closed via update values, that one is using our resolution screen, which has got less fields on it. So I haven't confused myself sometimes. And the original resolution screen has got more content. So I'm going to choose done. And now the developer value is set to Ignacio. So now I can change this as signee back to myself, but that developer field will always remain. Now, why would we do that? Well, if we go back to in progress, I know we've only got a couple of minutes left here. So if I review this, yeah, we're still editing, good. Just gonna clean off these other tabs again. And we go from reopen back to in progress. Instead of it going back to the current user, I'm going to edit this one, which I can't. Get rid of that. I'm going to add a post function. And can I copy value from another field? So I'm going to see if I can copy from developer to assignee. Let's see if this works. And I'll publish that draft. And accidentally opened that in a new window. Okay, so now if I go back here and I go from close, so I've got Ignacio as the developer. It's currently assigned to me and I'm the current user. And so now if I reopen, let's make it Kudzi. Okay, so I'm the current user, Kudzi is the assignee, Ignacio is the developer. Now if I go to in progress, I'll set it to Ignacio, which is the developer. So we're right on time. I know that I haven't gone through everything else that I wanted to go through with workflows. There's obviously quite a lot to go through here. I'm happy to stay on for a little while and keep going if anybody wants to continue. And whatever we discuss and demonstrate now will be in the recording that I'll make available later this afternoon. Does anybody want to keep going?
Paul, I got to jump off, but question that I had was around. Oh, geez, just jumped out of my mind.
That's all right. This is what Slack's for.
Yeah, look, I'll shoot it through to Slack. Yeah, sorry, it's just my mind just went blank.
No problem at all. Happens to me all the time. All right. Thanks heaps, guys. In Slack, I'll ask what we'd like to talk about next week. I think we had talked about doing roadmaps next week, but maybe we'll have a bit of a vote on whether we continue with workflows and diving into this a bit more, or whether we get stuck into roadmaps. But thanks heaps, everybody, for coming along today. And it's awesome to see you having a go. I know this was really full on. There's a lot in it for workflows. But please, if you need any help or you want to play around and stuff, let's chat on Slack and message me and we can help you out.
I got to go, but I remember it's post transitions, but I'll ask you in Slack about post transitions.
Yep. Awesome.
Post functions. Terrific.
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Paul.
No worries. All right. Thanks heaps, everybody.
Cheers. Bye for now.
Okay. See ya.